last night I had really just a really simple quinoa dish that I make. So I basically make quinoa, and then I use up whatever vegetables and leftovers I have in my refrigerator. So I put in some pine nuts, I put in some red pepper, I put in some broccoli, I had a little bit of cauliflower, which I grilled and threw in, and I put that right in there with the quinoa. And I actually even had 2 hard-boiled eggs I had to use up before I left town. So I just put in the egg whites there. I didn't put in the yolk. I put that in, and literally I put a little salt, a little pepper, and then I squeeze one big old lemon over the whole thing, and I gobble that baby up. It is so tasty, right? Because it has all these proteins, really great, a lot of protein and really great carbs, and just that little bit of lemon gives it just enough flavor, just enough seasoning to bring all the natural flavors of everything. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's really one of my go-to dishes. It's super easy to make.
Now, I have a question. Do you make the quinoa plain and then mix it with the veggies, or do you make a pilaf and put the veggies in while you're cooking the quinoa?
I make it by itself and mix everything else in later. Because one of the things I usually have in my fridge a big old thing of quinoa that's just made, because if I'm running late or don't have time, it's very easy I can eat the quinoa by itself with just a little bit of seasoning, or it's very easy to throw the quinoa on a salad or with whatever I have left over.
Yeah, put an egg on it. That's my solution to everything these days, is put an egg on it. Yeah.
Put an egg on it.
Right. Yeah, and later at some point we're going to talk about pantry staples in one of our episodes, and things that you want to have in the house and have in the fridge, and that's a perfect example. Well, so last night I was going out with some friends, and we were going to watch, there was a screening of a horror movie in a cemetery nearby. I don't even remember what the movie is, because that's not my thing. It was my friend's thing. And I was like, sure, I'll go. And we hadn't talked about whether we were bringing food or not. And it was a little bit later, so I thought maybe everyone had eaten. So I was like, I'm going to bring something healthy. So I brought cut up cantaloupe and watermelon. I was like, that's what I'm going to have.
Oh my God.
I had a little snack beforehand, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be food or not. So I didn't want to eat a lot, but I didn't want to eat nothing. So we go, and I get in the car. They pick me up. I get in the car, and sitting next to me on the back seat is a bag of like 17 different kinds of crap food. There was all these little miniature candy bars. There was all these weird sort of like corn chippy type things of different nationalities. There was, I don't even know what else was in there. So I, of course, immediately start ripping open the crap, because it's me in the backseat with a bag of food. So I start...
What, your cantaloupe didn't win out?
I don't even know where the cantaloupe was at that point. It was probably in the trunk where it belonged. And I was sitting there with the freaking mounds and the like Mexican Cheetos or whatever they were. I don't even know. So we're driving around, and it turns out the line for this movie was so incredibly long. It went like blocks, literally blocks and blocks, and we couldn't park, so we bailed. Yeah, totally. So we ended up going back to their place, and the people we were going to meet there, we met at our friend's apartment. And those people had brought fried chicken from a chain place. And then on the way back, we stopped at Trader Joe's and bought a bunch of like appetizers. So I ended up having a candy picnic, basically. I ate just a ton of candy and fried food. And then at the end, I'm like, cantaloupe and watermelon, anyone? And so that was how we finished. It was great, actually. Everyone was like, oh, yay, something fresh and healthy. Yeah, but it was really sort of ridiculous.
Yes, let me partake. Please bring it over.
That was what happened. It turned out to actually be excellent cantaloupe and watermelon. And if I had, in fact, started with it, it might have saved me a little bit of whatever.
My kingdom for some instincts that move me in the right direction. My kingdom.
Hello there, I'm Kate DeVore.
And I'm Rick Fiore, and this is our ongoing conversation about food, weight management, and our endeavor to be and stay healthy in a really tasty world.
We have a really special treat today. Today's episode is entitled Natalie Miller, interview about self-compassion, awareness, and saying yes. I just like saying her name, Natalie Miller. We have our very first interview today, and Rick is interviewing his colleague, Natalie, who is a life coach and co-owner of Willow Street Yoga in Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, Maryland. And we're really excited to have her on our podcast. It's a little bit of a longer episode. We have a special edition today. We thought about cutting it up, but it didn't make sense. So we just have the interview and then a little bit of a discussion between Rick and I afterwards. So we hope you enjoy.
Enjoy. Please welcome to the podcast our very first guest, Natalie Miller. Natalie is the co-owner of one of the largest yoga studios in the country, Willow Street Yoga, and she's also a personal coach, personal life coach. She's a mom, and she's an all-around enthusiast for self-help things. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ricky.
Oh my God, Ricky. Do you understand? Very few people call me Ricky.
I know.
You and my family. So I thought I'd start by asking, what did you eat last night?
What did I eat last night? You know, without even trying to, I ate a really freaking healthy meal last night. I had, I've been doing this thing lately where I make up a bunch of lentils.
Nice.
And chill them. Because you know what, like I'm a Whole Foods salad bar person, you know?
Yeah.
I love the Whole Foods salad bar. And I'm just thinking to myself, I could recreate this in my refrigerator, like various options to pair together. So I had some leftover lentils and I had some quinoa something. And I had some chopped up green things, lettuce and
Nice.
etc. And then dressing and, you know, like my own personal little salad bar thing.
Would you say you generally eat well?
I generally eat pretty well. I love to cook and I love food. And that said, I totally love Cheetos and
Nice.
chocolate and
When you think about food or planned food, how does it go through your head? Because when it happens to me, I sort of think about it in two ways. Like when I think about planning food, it's sort of, one way that goes through my head is sort of like a Julia Roberts movie, right? It shows up a little bit, sort of annoying, ultimately not very satisfying. And then the other way it sort of shows up in my head is sort of like that new Mad Max movie, just like an assault of images and sounds that are nonstop and they're crazy. So those are the two battles that usually go on in my head when I think about, oh, what am I going to eat? Am I going to eat well?
Yeah, you know, I get really into like I get into phases, right? Where I'll have like a salads phase, and I'm kind of in that right now. I'm in this like make my own refrigerator of salads phase. And then I'll go through like a baked things phase. But I find that for me, I like cooking and I'm interested in nutrition enough that that's what really excites me. So finding new recipes or seeing new ingredients at the grocery or at the farmer's market and being like, oh, I want to figure out something to do with that. And so that's usually how it works for me in meal planning. And then, you know, I have this bunch of kids also.
Right.
So one of whom is vegetarian and the other of whom are very carnivorous.
How old's your vegetarian?
11.
Wow.
Yeah.
11 and a veg. Gotta love it.
11 and a veg. Yeah. So, you know, I'm planning for them too. But you know, for me, I mean, like, for example, when I was listening to you and Kate's first episodes on the smoothie episode and it, like that, hearing about something gets me really excited about it. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, smoothies.
Oh,
so
nice.
then, you know, I go for like a week of smoothies. And so I try to remember that, right? Whenever I get into a phase where I'm like, you know, eating nachos, when I'm in a nachos phase, for example, is to remember, oh, right, actually, I get excited about new things, new ingredients. And so, you know, if I can muster myself a new direction, that usually works well. Yeah.
One of the reasons I thought it'd be great to have you on this podcast is because you've said, or I've heard you talk about this whole idea that you believe that true health and well-being, it depends on our ability to love and honor our whole self. So I just want to unpack that a little bit with you. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So when you say that true health, like what is true health for you when you think about that for yourself and for other people?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, especially you can see this in the yoga world rampantly, right? That you can have some pretty maybe impressive musculoskeletal health and be a basket case. Right?
What? Never seen it.
Or, right, you can also be like a fairly well-adjusted person and not be fully in your body, like, you know, exercising and taking care of yourself. And so for me, I guess health is just this whole package of like enjoying being in the world. And that takes strength. That takes flexibility. That takes a healthy relationship, by which I guess I mean kind of a balanced relationship with things like food and sleep and just self-care generally.
But that whole idea of being in health, being in this world, that comes first before anything else. That whole idea of really being happy and feeling good in the world.
Yes, yeah. Totally. Being happy and being in the world. And so, I mean, for me, what that does for me, like with a relationship with food, for example, is it makes me think, I don't want to say no very much, right? I don't. Yeah. I don't want to. I want to have dessert when I go out to eat, or I want to buy the organic berries that are so beautiful at the market, and that kind of say yes really appeals to me. I think as in terms of a say yes and also do what you want. Say yes and do what you want. Eat what you want.
Yeah.
Eat what you want.
I love that idea, because really learning to eat what you want, I think when people really pay attention to what they want, it's generally going to lead them in the right direction, not just sort of what's the habit or, not just sort of what they're used to eating. I think that's such a really great thing.
Yeah, totally. And I also think it helps us avoid all kinds of, destructive and self-sabotaging relationships with food. So, in my opinion, right? Yeah. So, for me, I notice that the times in my life when I get really restrictive in my thinking around food, that is when I get the most bingey.
Oh, interesting.
It just is. Yeah. Because I start thinking, I shouldn't. And that pretty much will set me up for a slip of a whole week or month.
Right.
Whereas if I say, yes, that dessert looks really good and I'm going to eat it and I'm not going to feel bad about it, it like the psychological experience doesn't linger,
Yeah.
Like it kind of like I enjoy it and then I'm able to move on.
Were you always that way?
No.
What were you like before?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to say most, middle class white women of a certain age. I've had
What? What is this? What is this of which you speak? Middle class white women of a certain age?
Well, no. I mean, I'm of the eating disorder generation, right? Like we all have our versions of it. Whether it's like calorie counting, which is, a pretty benign version of it, I think, or binging and purging. For me, it was the worst when I was in college. I gained my freshman 15 pounds. I went home and lost it. Honestly, I think because I was home and I was happy and comfortable and eating the things that I liked to eat and not stressing about it. But then when I went back to school, I was determined not to gain the weight back. And so I did crazy shit. Like
what?
Oh yeah, this is the bottom. You want to know the bottom?
Please,
okay.
I love the bottom.
Okay, the bottom.
Welcome to the bottom, everyone.
Welcome to the bottom. Well, of course, and here's the thing, right? I didn't really know anything about nutrition. I didn't understand that part of the reason I was having a hard time with my weight at college was that I was just like, it was a carb fest. I didn't know, right? I didn't understand. So, so I would be hungry. I would be hungry a lot. And I would allot myself saltine crackers. I would count them out like precious coins. 1, 2, 3. And I don't remember the number, but it was a small number. So I'd be studying at night, I'd be sitting there and there would be my precious little stack of saltine crackers and I would slowly eat them. And when I came to the bottom, I wouldn't eat anymore. Wow. And I did that. I mean, I did that like for a good year. And then from that age of like 19, all the way up, I would really say, I mean, it still happens sometimes today if I get unhappy with how I look in a bathing suit, or if I get, if I start to feel uncomfortable in my skin. Not the saltine thing, but other things will kind of creep up.
Right.
And it's been this, journey up and down of just being weird around food. And I would say being weird is just like being restrictive and a lot of like, I shouldn't. It's exhausting.
Do you still have a lot of that conversation going on in your head about food, or has it sort of curbed itself?
Well, I mean, I think since I became more aware of the effect of my thinking on my behaviors, and more understanding that the way that I'm considering how I'm acting, or the way I'm considering my choices, how I'm thinking about my choices, has a lot to do with what my next choices will be. So if I make a choice to say, go out to eat and have an extra glass of wine and a big dessert, and I feel terrible about it, then probably I will spend the next day being restrictive. And I mean, there are studies that show that when you restrict your calorie intake, you're basically activating your amygdala, you're activating your evolutionary psychology, the psychology that we had not even so many years ago, right? That said, hey, see something, eat it, right?
Yeah,
because that's
totally
how we survived. And so when we restrict calories, there's all, kinds of places you can read about it. When we restrict calories, we basically activate that system. And so then every muffin is not just like, do I want that? No, not really. It's like, do I want that? Yes. No.
I need it for survival. I must have it.
Rick, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I need it for survival. And it's a deep thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like some override switch is flipped and I'm reaching for the muffin. I don't even want it. Right?
Welcome to most of my life. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm so with you. And when you talk about it, I'm like, yes, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
you'd always say, so you said that you believe that true health, right, and well-being depends on our ability to love and honor ourselves. So how do you talk to people about loving themselves and honoring themselves? Because I'm in this real big phase right now about really trying to make sure that I'm trying to pay really close attention to how much I send signals, right, and thoughts about my body and that I don't like my body.
Yeah.
When in fact, my body has served me so well 99.9% of the time. Like, I'm really amazed at what it can do and how well it does. And even at my advanced age right now, I'm blown away by it. Like, I definitely feel like I'm someone who's getting better with age, and my body gets better with age. And
Like
I get
a
stronger.
fine wine.
Oh, God, someone drink me, please. So what do you tell people when you get into this conversation about how do you, love and honor your whole self?
yeah, I'm really interested in self-compassion. And when I say self-compassion, I don't just mean it as kind of a throwaway thing. I mean it as this idea that Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer and others are kind of developing. And self-compassion has three components. One component, I think the hardest component actually, is self-kindness. Mm-hmm. Just being nice to yourself. Just not beating yourself up, not going all judgy, just loving yourself, right? That part I find the hardest. But the easier ones, the other two components that I find easier are, one, the idea of common humanity. And so this is the idea that it's hard to be a human. It's hard to be a human, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
The amount of self-control it takes to just live in the world, right? My dogs get mad at each other. They just bite each other.
Totally.
I don't get to do that.
I agree. I'm in this phase with all my friends not all my friends, I should say, with certain people where I'm just like, things happen, right? You have these little snippets and these little fights like dogs do. And sometimes you just have to do it and get on and move through it. It doesn't need to be lingered over. It doesn't need to be held on to. Mm-hmm. It just needs to sort of happen.
No, exactly. And so, speaking of my dogs, I put a bowl of food down and they're like, yes, food. And they're not like, oh, I don't know. How much have I eaten today? Well, I don't know. I mean, I did have that bone with peanut butter in it.
Can I put sauce on it?
Exactly. Right. I mean, and they just have a different relationship with it. So, the common humanity piece also, I think, says it not only is it hard to be a human, but we are still evolving, right? Like, our ability to make choices that think about ourselves in the future, that think about ourselves in the past, depends on our humanity that's still developing. And underneath that, we are animals. We are animals, right? And so understanding that, it's an evolutionary thing, understanding that the way that I see my body is completely affected by how women on the fronts of magazines look and what people say about obesity. And, it's like, it's not an isolated thing. We live in a cultural matrix that currently, not always, right? But currently values thinness and an aesthetic, right? It's like the ability to say no and to abstain. Yeah. So we live in that, and that's culturally valued. And so even if we can maybe intellectually disagree with it or say, well, that's not the way I want to live, nonetheless, it's out there, and of course it affects us. Yeah.
So you have 3 girls, right?
Yeah.
What are their ages?
Yeah, they're 11 and 8 and 5.
So how do you even begin to have, I guess 2 questions for you. How do you begin to have this whole conversation about what we just talked about, right? The aesthetic of thinness. And then also, how do you think about food choices for them at this early age? And do you think about how it's going to play out for them in 15 to 20 years, the choices that either you're making for them now or you're encouraging them to make now?
Yes, all those things. Yes. I mean, first I would say, because I don't want them to be saltine counting college students.
Who doesn't want a saltine counter, Natalie?
I know. I have to say, I'm blessed with really adventurous eaters. My kids are not in the chicken nugget and fries crowd. They are really willing to try lots of different things. I talk about nutrition a lot, and I talk about balancing meals in various ways. I do my best to not talk about size, but whether it's, subliminally from me or unintentionally, I guess, from me, or it's, if it's happening just because they also live in this cultural web. My 8-year-old twice has said, "Does this make me look fat?"
Wow.
Which is so crazy.
That's heavy. Like, how do you even begin to unpack that with them or for them?
Right. No, I mean, it's really challenging. And so, we talk a lot about what can our bodies do? I mean, we were just saying this, Rick, what does my body do? Okay. There's what it looks like. There's its stats, right? But what can it do? Can it hike me to the top of a mountain? Yes. Can it swim in the ocean? Yes.
Can it help me stand on my head? Yes.
Yes, yeah. Right? And so, and all of those things are just, I think, when we think about what can my body do and how can I take care of my body so it can do more, right? Because I'm going to tell you, the saltine counting person, right, was wearing very small pants, but she was not healthy, right?
Were you popular at least?
I don't even think I think I was so self-obsessed I didn't even know.
Look at me, I'm the saltine girl. Come.
Oh my God.
Something you said made me think about when I was younger. I always remember people telling me how important it was not to be fat. No one ever told me, this is what I think in my head, but no one ever told me how important it is to be thin. What's your opinion on the value of that, the difference that when you're thin and you walk into a room, whether it's a yoga studio or if you see a student walk into a yoga studio and they're either thin or they're heavy, what does that play in your mind? How does that play out in your mind? Does that even register for you? And what do you think? And then how do you think that just plays out in society? Because I just tend to think that for thinner people, thin is in, right? And it just makes such a difference when someone walks into the room and they seem height, weight, proportionate. Any thoughts? That's sort of a rambling question, but
yeah, I really hear that. Gosh, it's so interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking Lena Dunham today just today.
Lena Dunham's the creator of and star of Girls on HBO.
Yeah. Like that's her thing. And she's like she's a very vocal feminist and
people seem to love her or really, really hate her.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with her being a white feminist. Right? Yeah. So it's tricky. No, it's a tricky thing. So, no, but Lena Dunham, she was just, on the cover of a Spanish magazine, and she wrote on social media, she said, hey, shout out to, I think the magazine was Tentaciones. She's like, hey, Tentaciones, thank you so much for putting me on your cover. My body has never looked like that. And Tentaciones came out and said, we're sorry, we promised we didn't retouch the photograph. And they showed how they had cropped the photograph. But clearly, I mean, as Lena Dunham comes back and says, I'm sorry, I know my thigh gap and it's never been that big, right?
Wow.
And so she says, basically we've got to get to the bottom of this because somewhere down the line this happened. And she said, we live in a world where people don't know what normal women even look like. Or I'm going to expand that and say normal people, right? Like I remember just earlier this year, we were going on a vacation to the Caribbean. And before we were going, I'm thinking like, oh gosh, am I going to wear a bikini? Am I going to wear a regular bathing suit? And then I got there and it's like when you're at the beach, there's just bodies. It's like when you're in the reality of it, all of a sudden it doesn't matter. It's for me, when I'm in my head, when I'm browsing bloomingdales.com for bathing suits that I'm like, I don't know, can I wear that or not? But then I actually get there and there's just people with their bodies wearing bathing suits, being all different ways. So I guess for me, in a yoga class, people walk in and I don't think I do register. I don't register so much like big, small, proportionate, but I do register this kind of, is this person comfortable in their skin? Like, that kind of, that sense that you can feel like this person is walking in a body that they feel connected with. That
they own whatever they have. Yeah.
Yeah. And that they're and I mean, there's all kinds of things. There's shyness, there's height, tall people, I think who feel sheepish about being tall. You can see how they try to like shove themselves into a smaller into a smaller frame. And so I do see that, but I see it, I mean, I see it with love, because I just think especially I think in a yoga classroom, it's courageous to walk in your cozy clothes and bare feet. And
totally.
so
particularly when you have this body that doesn't fit the type that you see in most, particularly like for on the cover of Yoga Journal, right? That's one of the big things that people always see and have a picture of what a yogi should look like. And then they're thinking, I got to walk into the studio and I don't have that body. I can't do those poses. So I totally get that. Yeah. Can I get political for a second?
Yeah.
All right. So Natalie's the person that always talks me down every political season because I get so worked up, and I get very worked up very early on. So this is totally, wow, this conversation is just going, but in different places. But one of the things you said really made me think, because I was talking in a group at a party, and we were, of course, talking about all the candidates from Trump to Hillary to Bernie. And one of the comments that was made was about Hillary. And I thought this was really interesting. There's so much you could say about Hillary, but I think the funniest thing that someone said is, she just reminds me of my grandma. And I was like, what do you mean? And they totally just literally talked about her shape from the bottom down, like this sense of proportion. And I thought that was so interesting, right? Because I thought, here's this woman who's totally accomplished like all these other things, all these other great things, but yet it still somehow comes down to this sort of quality and a feeling, and just a feeling, an emotional response that he was having to her body. And I thought that was so interesting. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting in that regard is we're visual people, right? I mean, people are visual. And so of course we respond to visual cues, but I was just, as you were talking about, as you said, can we get political? And I started thinking about bodies. I thought, oh my gosh, we have little Marco, right? We have like perpetually orange Donald Trump with the hair, and we make fun of the hair. And we have Ted Cruz, and my girls say he looks like a sick frog.
That's cute.
Kinda.
It's kind of does. Yeah.
He does. Yeah. And then there's Hillary, and oh my gosh, like how many, her hair, her skin, her outfits, her color choices, right? Like what colors she chooses to wear. And then Bernie and Bernie's messy hair, right? And it's just so interesting that we look at a person and we imagine we can read something. I mean, I think we can in a way read something about them from the way that they present in the world, but there's so many filters over top of that, right? Mm-hmm. Like the grandma filter, or the hairspray, the hairsprayed hair filter, or
the rich guy,
yeah,
the old Jewish guy filter,
totally, yeah. I mean, Marco's high-heeled boots, right? Woo, right? Totally. And I mean, and look, I mean, I think fashion matters. I think it matters what you choose to wear, and at the same time, it's like to think that we get some direct sense of someone without really kind of being with them, around them, right?
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes. So I want to get to a couple of minutes left. So I want to get to this other point. So what role do you think, getting back on track here, what role do you think, or what's your opinion on habit, right? And habit in relation to consuming food? Because I certainly know what my habits are. And one of the things I always think about, do habits, does that training, does that thinking, do you think, does it ever really go away? I think it gets curbed, and I think we get better at controlling it and monitoring it. But do you feel like it ever goes away, or is it always there, like a sleeper cell? You know what I mean? Whatever habit you have, is it always there, just ready to like pop out and get you?
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about a habit, Rick, are you talking about like an undesirable habit?
I guess in this context, yes. In relation to food, I am. Because one of my habits is I eat heavy foods late at night. And it's just a really bad habit I have. And I've gotten really better at it over the years. But every time it rears up, I'm like, oh, interesting. Because you get it in your head that you've solved it, or you've licked it, or you've controlled it better, or you're able to monitor it. But then before you know it, it's like 11 o'clock and an entire pizza's gone.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. Well, it's interesting because I was noticing I didn't come back around to that third component of self-compassion, which is mindfulness. And actually, that's huge for, I think, to notice that you're doing something, right?
Yeah.
To just go, oh, I notice I'm having another bowl of chips with guacamole, right? Just to notice that you're doing it. And if you are so strong and so courageous that you can do that without self-judgment and just notice, I think that's where kind of our ability to shape our habits is most powerful. I don't think our ability to shape our habits is very powerful if we're saying, oh, there you go again, or I know I shouldn't, but I will. Instead of going, interesting, tonight I'm really feeling like I need these cookies. And noticing also, right, because I'm betting you're going to vibe with this, noticing also that sometimes we don't get what we're after, right? It's like the cookies taste good, but then at the end there's that feeling of like,
I still didn't get what I want.
I didn't get what I want. Yeah. And what I did get doesn't actually even feel that good, but I'm not going to get a clear understanding of the effect of my action unless I can get out of the self-blame, self-hatred thing, right? Because I think that you have to just kind of go, and so this is what me at my best functioning, which is by all means not all the time, me at my best functioning goes something like this. Oh, I really want another piece of pizza. Do I? How would I feel? Yeah. You know what? I do want to eat one, but I don't want that feeling. I don't want that heaviness that I'm going to get at the end. So I think I'm going to say no.
So you're noticing it, and then in the moment you're asking yourself, do you want it, right? And then it seems like you're also projecting a little bit into the future, right? If I have this other piece, I know what that feeling's like, and am I going to want that again.
Right. And
That's
but it's all framed in terms of what do I want instead of what should I do? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what do I want? Do I, and sometimes the answer is, I do want another piece of pizza and I'm going to have it. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works that way. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, habits then are going to be best helped when I'm thinking, what do I want? And for me, sometimes that means removing the chips decision by not buying them. Right. Because sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? I don't even want to have that decision to make. I'd rather have something else in the house or whatever.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah.
Natalie, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for being our very first guest on our podcast. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, you can come and read my blog and learn more about me at nataliekmiller.com. That's my personal website. And then I'm here teaching yoga at Willow Street Yoga Center in Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, Maryland. And that's willowstreetyoga.com. So yeah, come see. Thank you for having me, Ricky.
My pleasure. Thanks, Natalie.
Hey, Rick, what are you into these days?
So I've really been trying to work on my dessert. So for my dessert, I've been doing a simple mixture of Greek yogurt, plain. And then I add a big old dollop of honey on top of that. And then I add seeds, like either some pumpkin seeds or some sunflower seeds. It's sweet, it's good, it seems to satisfy all of my cravings.
Are seeds better for you than nuts in that context?
Yes, generally. They're easier to digest.
Thank you. Good to know, because I might do that with walnuts, so it's good to know that seeds are actually better.
Yeah. Hey, Kate, what are you into these days?
I'm into making frozen desserts in my Vitamix that are kefir-based. So I'm using...
What?
Yes, kefir, which is a variant of yogurt. It's got more probiotics, but unfortunately less protein. And it's liquidier. And then I mix it up with agave and fruit. And then I freeze it for like an ice creamy type situation.
My God, that sounds good.
It is. Rick, I loved that interview. Thank you so much for doing it.
Oh my gosh, thank you. My pleasure. It was fun to do.
I bet. And Natalie sounds completely awesome.
She is.
So I just want to talk about a few of the things that really struck me and resonated with me a little bit in there. And just talk about how other elements of it relate to stuff that we say all the time and just sort of tie things in. Fun. So one of the things I loved was the idea that her definition of health as enjoying being in this world.
Isn't that a good one?
Yeah. Like, what does that mean to you?
It means a lot of work, in a weird way, because I heard it and I thought the reason it has so much power is, because you have to do work to enjoy being in this world, because being in this world and enjoying it takes work. What struck me about it is we expect like enjoyment to come easily, but you sort of have to work at enjoyment. You know what I mean? You have to work at enjoying life.
Huh. Yeah.
It always reminds me of that book, Eat, Pray, Love, where she says she has to practice diligent joy. She has to practice being joyful. So I guess that's what I loved about it. What about you?
Yeah, I think so too. I think I agree with that. And I also don't understand why that would be. Like, we are in the most privileged segment of society alive at this time. And what is it that makes it difficult to find joy in this moment? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is what's so interesting about what she brings up. I think it ties into this whole idea that this is really the whole point. I think sometimes when I practice yoga and meditation, that I feel like a lot of times meditation is the practice of remembering, because it's easy to forget, the embodiment we actually are in, and that's part of the challenge is you forget, and then you have to meditate or you do yoga or do whatever, so you remember, oh yeah, right. Awesome. Should enjoy it.
Yeah, totally. So I do think that's a big part of the work is that just remembering, like, hello, come on. Yeah.
Totally.
Just like, but those little things, like every single time I get into my bed and every time I wake up, I'm like, I love my bed. I enjoy my bed so much. And I'm always so happy about how much I am happy.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess we got to take it where we can find it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so I love that. I enjoy being in this world. I love that because it's physical, it's spiritual, it's mental, it's psychic, it's emotional. I also liked the idea of, I thought this was interesting, saying yes and eating what you want. And I thought that brought up a really interesting concept because depending on where I am in my own balance of my health and all of that, what I want is either good for me or not good for me. And I wonder if there's a difference between in things we've talked about before in terms of addiction. Like if you're in an addictive cycle, eating what you want maybe isn't the same as somebody who isn't in an addictive cycle.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think you're right. I guess I'm thinking what struck me about it is this whole idea that there's something less painful about saying yes, ultimately. It's a little bit easier. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but that's a different topic. I think that has to do with the idea of focusing on food in terms of inclusion versus exclusion, like what you do eat versus what you don't eat, which I think is different than having the thing. And I'm all about, like, you can't deprive. I totally get you. Like, the saying no doesn't work. But that isn't the same as eat what you want. That's a different directive to me. And I think later when she talks about want and really looking at what you want, when she finally comes back, I was so excited you guys came back to that third principle of self-compassion, which was mindfulness. I was like, what's the third one? And yay. But was about like when you were asking about habit also was when she was like, well, do I want it? And by that, I mean, not just do I want to eat it, but do I want to feel like that after I've eaten it? And
I thought
really
that was
going in, right? Really
I thought that was really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. To what to want. So I think if I think of wanting like that, then when you go back to eating what you want, makes sense. But I think that she's so right that we've confused what do I want with, I can't remember what word she used that we confuse it with, but something else. Yeah,
I thought that was a really great idea. That really stuck with me after the interview.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things also, totally. And I loved how she talked about mindfulness, which is what we keep talking about, and just being present with and noticing and observing and being non-judgmental like you are in meditation. And I like how much commonality there is, I think. And it'll be interesting to see the people that we interview from here on out. Like, we will only interview people who are on our page. It'll be interesting.
Can you imagine?
Totally. I also love the thing about perception about when you walk into a room and you're thin or when you're heavy. And you and I are both so interested in that just mentioning, we have a whole podcast dedicated to that coming up within a few episodes. So we are going to have a whole conversation about that because that is very interesting. I love the idea about restriction leading to binge, which we also talked about in the addiction episodes and how that happens.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, totally. And again, the idea of including good things versus excluding not good things, which is another thing that I think we're going to talk about in more depth later at some point, too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much, Natalie. And it was a delight. And thank you, Rick, for that awesome interview.
Oh, my God. My pleasure. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie has a great blog you should check out. You can find that and more about Natalie on her website, nataliekmiller.com. And also you can find her at willowstreetyoga.com. This podcast, as always, is supported by the generous donation of our listeners. That's you. Please visit patreon.com/you-won't-believe-what-I-ate to support the podcast.
And we're also so excited to finally be able to hear from you guys directly on our podcast. So please send us an MP3, 30 seconds or so. Ask us a question. Just record it straight on your phone. Make a comment, and we'll include it in an upcoming episode. So you can email it to us at youwon'tbelievewhatIate@gmail.com. You can visit our website, youwon'tbelievewhatIate.com, where you can also see a whole bunch of fun information from the episodes, or you can access our website through our fun Facebook page.
And remember, subscribe on iTunes and YouTube. And please review us, review us, and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you.
And also get everyone you know to do that, please. That would be great.
Everyone.
And join us for our next episode and learn about superfoods and inflammation. What is it? What causes it? And what makes it better?